Welcome everyone, this is Mark and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our new show here that will be on the tiawakkichannel.com. I am Mark the Prepper Guy and I wanted to put together a show that covers the news and all things the end of the world. Politics is always playing a major part in what could cause the end of the world. It's pretty simple. If the economy is going to collapse, it'll be because of the ass clowns in Washington that did something stupid. It'll be because of those no good do-gooders in your county that screwed up your life. So we're going to talk about issues like that, but also on nutrition. And then also we're going to talk about being prepared, mindset, gear, skills, such things like that. And we're going to try to tie it in all the time. So what's going on in the news today? I just watched a live stream from Alex Jones. Now a lot of people might say Alex Jones is crazy, but he does find some interesting stuff out there.
So you have found the mother lode of election fraud.
Yeah, it tells you how to do everything.
Is it not clear that Hillary and the media are trying to sell the idea that there is an election fraud and that Trump's going to lose by a landslide when the polls and everything else show something opposite?
Let me put it this way. Of course, things have been very surprising of late. But if she is still viable in any way, whether or not she wins, she will win. We've found some new information, and I think it's the missing piece that we didn't have before.
And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this election and this vote shaving, I guess is what they're calling it. And what vote shaving is instead of reversing your vote when you push the button and vote for Hillary or Trump, instead of it just flipping that right where you can see it, now what's happening is they're shaving the votes at the main tabulation centers. And these are big voting machine manufacturers that bring all the data in, and then it's tabulated at maybe a state level or even 3 or 4 counties to where they can get this information to them quickly. And then it's tabulated so the news and everyone knows about it. Sounds kind of Orwellian, and we would think, well, that would never happen. So let's kind of look into what is happening in our election in America this year. So vote shaving is maybe new to this generation of people because now everything's done electronically and by computer. So you still, vote on your paper ballot and mark each one in some counties. But then they're fed through a machine and those numbers are sent off somewhere else. And so you think, oh look, my vote was counted by that fancy machine. Well, back in the 80s, what ended up happening was there were some computer programmers that had figured out how to do this in the banking industry.
Actually, it's probably more like $143.80 and 1/2 cents. There are always fractions left over in big corporations, but they round it down to the lowest whole number.
It goes way back, like I say, in the 80s, and when computers first started getting used for banks to calculate interest. Well, a computer, when it does a mathematical computation, it goes out past the 2 decimals, $1.00. Well, when it calculates it, it goes $1.000065. And so even as it's rounded up, it stops at the next zero. So 65 would make it 7, but it's still 0.00007. Well, the computers just drop that fraction off and it's not calculated because it's irrelevant. It's a mathematical equation. Well, what these smart computer programmers back in the day were doing was they would take all of those last little digits off of the end and they were putting it into another account. Well, this is theft because now it's become real money once it's put into an account. And so they were being busted with hundreds of thousands of dollars over all of these tabulations. And they went to jail. It took them a while to figure it out, but the FBI back then, doing their job, figured it out. And these bad programmers ended up in jail. Well, this is essentially what vote shaving is. So how does this work in our elections today? Well, what they're doing now is instead of just saying Hillary won by a landslide, because they know people wouldn't buy that. We've seen her rallies. No one is showing up.
Brother Jim Beckwith reporting here from Now the End Begins. Yesterday's date, crooked Hillary campaign used a green screen at today's low turnout rally in Coconut Creek, Florida.
So let's say your county, it would be safe to assume, and not even your county, let's say your little voting district would be 50% Trump and 50% Hillary. That's a statistical polled average. So what they do is they go, well, we're going to figure it when we do the algorithm that 49% voted for Trump and 51% voted for Hillary. Well, then everyone goes, whew, that was a close one. We almost made it or we barely got it. There's no red flags. Now, when you do this across the country, there's 3,000 plus counties. And who knows how many voting places there are in each county. Now, let's assume that in one county, Trump statistically would get 700 votes and Hillary would get 300. Well, now all of a sudden, Hillary got 400 and Trump only got 600. Wow. Well, whew, we still got it. Trump won this county. No one sees it. And this is done by big computers somewhere else. And so all of our paper ballots were counted. Yay! Everything works in America again. Isn't this wonderful? So you don't see these little shaving maneuvers that go on in a computer. But the overall outcome will be that Hillary wins by 2-3% because that's what the polling's been saying all along. So they just start fudging the numbers here, there, and all across the board based on statisticals and polling and, people participation for as much as all that's worth. So in a county that Hillary's going to get 700-800 votes and Trump might get 200. Now all of a sudden, Trump gets 175. No one sees that as a big surprise. But the algorithm is designed to where the outcome overall will be that Hillary wins. Now they're starting to catch on to this, that are being investigated because of this. Soros machines and Diebold machines, they're all in on it. They all do these tabulations and they're slowly starting to get control of this, and we can't have voter fraud in America. So now it's just going to these big computers that tabulate it, and the end result will be what they want because these mathematical algorithms are in the machine that actually tabulates the votes nationwide as the election goes through. So as you're watching the news and you're seeing, wow, Hillary's doing pretty good in that county. Well, we thought she would do good in that county. Well, not that good. She did really well. Trump tried to pull it off. It is California. Well, what'd you think? So you don't see it because it's small. It's like that 15-digit way out there on the end that the computer programmers used to put in an account. It added up. So this is not new. It's just new to America, where somebody would be so corrupt and so against American values and our vote that they would actually play with the election. This is what is happening. So we don't have much time, and we'll have to see what happens. But there is some noise out there. Don't dismiss it. Look into it. Talk to your county. Talk to the people in your little town and community that are in charge of elections. If there's a school down the street where you vote, ask them how it's tabulated. What's going on? Do you count the numbers? Because the best way to thwart this, just like the banks did, is eventually when they did their financials at the end of the year, they're like, wait a minute, this account has all this money in it, which came out of where? Well, just because it was a rounding error doesn't mean that all of a sudden there's 200,000 in an account, which means somewhere over the big scheme of things, there's 200,000 missing. And it didn't add up mathematically. And they got caught. Well, let's assume that every place where you vote, that little school or church down the road where you stand in the line and you actually scratch in your ballot and it runs through that machine, if every one of those counties counted that, and I'm not talking about the whole county, I'm talking about that little school that had 100 people show up. How hard is it to vote and count 100 votes? It's not that hard. Once the vote's handed in and put in a pile, then nobody knows whose vote it was. So you go, well, we got 30 for Hillary, 70 for Trump. Write it down and keep that as a paper copy. And then they can all be tabulated by people with calculators instead of computers with algorithms. We can go, no, she didn't win in this county. Trump did. No, Trump didn't win in this county. So we need to be vigilant. It's ever vigilant that keeps this representative republic free and being represented.
Preppers should always be prepared, and the Prepper Guy can help you find the supplies you need without having to get lost in a big box store or on a website designed to sell you everything else. Our online store offers a focused shopping experience, making it easy to zoom in to find what you need. Because we affiliate with Amazon to deliver our goods around the world, you'll always find the best values too. Find what you need at doomsdaydepot.com. Remember, that's Doomsday with a Z, where you can zoom in to find what you need and learn more at prepperguy.com too.
One of the big facets of being prepared and being a prepper have to do with food storage, food acquisition, food, gardening, growing, hunting. It's a big part of your preps, and therefore I think it should be a big part of your study. So before you go out and spend a lot of money on dehydrated food, grains, legumes, beans, and all that, you might want to understand how your diet affects your health. And as a prepper, the whole goal is to stay alive longer. So if you're eating a poor diet and you're basing those dietary decisions based on what you're hearing from pseudo-nutritionalists or something you read in a magazine, that would be like, believing the media. So you have to do your own research. And to do that, you need to start reading some more biochemistry on the human anatomy and how it processes food and how we were designed as a species to process that food. If you have horses, you can't feed them hay that has mold on it because of the way their digestion system operates within their biochemistry. But cows can eat hay that might have been wet and have a little bit of mold on it because it doesn't affect them the same way as a horse. And most people that are into large animals like that understand these things and they accept it and they go, well, that's because a horse processes the grass and the hay differently than the cow processes the grass and the hay. But then when you tell them, well, our body is the same way, and if you're eating carbohydrates, wouldn't there be a difference of how your body processes it from if you're eating meats and fats? And then they're like, well, yeah, but fats are bad for you, based on something that I read in Men's Health magazine. Really? So you need to understand that there are minute differences that the body does when it eats food and the types of food we put in it. So if you're going to be buying a supply of food, you really need to know what kind of food that is. And it, to me, is the same as if you have a car that you work on and all of the bolts are metric, you don't go buy SAE wrenches because they won't work. We're that way in our bodies. So we need to understand how our body works and what fuel makes us work. And I can tell you for a surety that most of the nutritionists and the commercials I see and the advertising I see and all of the videos I see, if you're eating a good diet, it consists of fruits, vegetables, and grains. And that's just not true. Fruits are sugar. You can call it natural sugar or good sugar or whatever you want, but it's not true on a biochemical level inside of your body. So sugar is bad. In fact, your body will tell you it's bad, and if you study it, you will see that it's bad. That's why the body has a hormone called insulin. If it didn't care about sugar being in the blood, and it was burning that for, energy, you wouldn't need insulin to get rid of it. Its primary goal is to get rid of it. And if you think the insulin is helping convert that sugar to energy, you're wrong. Because the more sugar you eat, the more insulin you're going to need. And then your body can only produce so much insulin in a day, and then you have to take a shot.
Hi there and welcome. There's a huge low-carb buzz circulating in the fitness and diet industries. Now we all know what low-carb means, but how does that work in relation to diets high in fat?
That is
Furthermore,
not natural.
how does this affect you and your body if you're an athlete, or better yet, an endurance athlete? I'm here with Russ Galla, who's more than an expert in this field, and he's going to discuss the high carbohydrate versus high fat diets and how it relates to you as an athlete. Russ, tell us a little bit about your history as an athlete and then what you've done in testing athletes.
Well, we started testing athletes back in 1984. I just left the SWAT team and I was trying to find a sport that would help me deal with the dead air and stop abusing alcohol. So I ended up with working out with a bunch of triathletes. And that was sort of ground zero for me. We were using a high-carb diet back then. We were training to do half Ironman and international distance races. And I was really blessed because I had two mentors, Jerry Gergley and Don Ardell, who were PhDs at a UCF, I was sort of following their lead because they were in their 50s and they were really fast and they knew a lot about the sport, so I started training with them.
So let me get this straight. I kind of know what you do, but just for the audience out there, you test the individuality of individuals, their biochemical markers. So genetics testing. Tell us a little bit about the genetics that you test that really shows how everyone is biochemically unique.
Yeah. Everyone is biochemically unique. So what that means is everybody's going to need different nutrition and different diet, different supplementation. And that's sort of where we're headed. Even every athlete that I work with, they have different nutritional deficiencies. And the lab that I work with and the physicians that I work with, we do that advanced testing to drill down to see what they need. I mean, we can't expect somebody to just take a handful of vitamins and expect something to happen with the millions of metabolic responses in the body.
All right, so getting back on the athlete track here, tell us about some of the athletes you work with and what you found out when you tested them.
Yeah, that was really interesting. We tested thousands of athletes, and we found a lot of them had imbalances in their hormone levels, imbalances in nutrition. And one of the main things that we found is they had an imbalance in their intestinal tract. So when your intestinal tract is out of balance, you're not even pulling any nutrients out of food. So back in the early 80s and the 90s when we started testing athletes, we knew that the high carb diet caused imbalances in yeast overgrowth in the intestinal tract. And we know now the intestinal tract is a second brain. So if your intestinal tract is out of balance, it affects how you feel and it affects your performance. And stepping it up a little, my Crohn's and irritable bowel clients have low growth hormone because their intestinal tract is so out of balance, they're not pulling protein out of the meat that they're eating, and it's keeping their growth hormone or their recovery hormone low. So that's to tell you how important the intestinal tract is in the area of performance.
Okay. So if these athletes want to do a low carb diet then, okay, so they stop eating all the high carbs, they do a low carb diet, can they just do low carb, or do they need to supplement the fats in there? Because it's my understanding that you need another fuel source. If you take one fuel source away, you need to supplement with another fuel source. And so those are fats, right? So tell us a little about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, for years, athletes all thought carbohydrates were important. We've been studying anthropologists and evolutionary biologists who study cultures since the beginning of time. And even on a cellular level, when DNA unzips to help our bodies create new tissue, it needs essential fatty acids, it needs essential amino acids, but there's no essential carbohydrates.
So whether you're in a culture that doesn't have carbs available or you just want to have a low carb diet, we were talking about supplementing fats and how you need to increase your fats in your diet because that's a different or better fuel source. So in order to do that, you have to shift from your carb burning or glucose to fat burning or ketones. So tell us a little bit about that shift there.
All right, when we have athletes that are high carb athletes and we're shifting their body into burning body fat, that's a transition. We call it the carbohydrate flu when they go through that. And we give people monitors so they actually check their blood and see if they're in fat burning. But a lot of folks feel so bad in this interval, they don't power through it. And that's where we have to hold their hand and make sure they understand this feeling is going to pass. Because once you shift your body from burning carbohydrates or glucose to burning fat, the fat that we measure is called beta-hydroxybutyrate. That's a big word for a ketone that supplies your brain and your heart with the energy to keep moving. And that's where all the athletes, that's where all this training is going to be headed. We're going to be on high-fat diets. So the person that just won the Western States 100-mile run was on a high-fat diet.
Just to make a note on top of that, I've actually done the little transition from burning carbs to burning fats. And you go through that transitionary period, which is very frustrating because you have low energy and frustration. I almost had a little bit of an anxiety attack.
That's what you felt.
Because, yeah, absolutely. Because your body is shifting and burning up all the sugar in your muscles.
Good for you.
And so once you get through that, you on the other side, when you're in ketosis, you feel like $1 million when you're on like a high. It's actually quite amazing.
Yeah, and when people, and that's what I'm saying, when you were going through that, it was kind of scary. So if you have somebody that's been eating carbohydrates for 20 years and then you're shifting their body into fat burning, that's when you really got to maintain contact with them.
It takes a lot though, a lot of willpower. your food choices go from here to like this much. You know, it definitely shrinks, but it's worth it, that's for sure. Tell us a little bit about how you transformed your metabolism into fat burning back in the 90s. You actually had a friend that you cycled with.
Yeah, back in the 90s, of course, all my roommates were professional triathletes, and I was never as fast as they were, but I did train with them during the warm-up. but one of my buddies was Patrick Davis. I mean, this guy would finish in the top 10 of races, and he was always shredded and very fast, you know, a track star. And great guy, and he started gaining weight, and he'll tell you about this. So I was doing research back then, trying to tweak everything because I was so slow. and we started using the ketogenic diet back in '96. And Patrick and I started experiment with this. And it's amazing, the fat just fell off after we were applying this ketogenic diet or the fat burning diet or the high fat diet to endurance exercise.
And it mentally kind of plays with you too, because from my understanding and my experience too, you don't need to eat 3 meals a day. You don't have to get up and have a huge breakfast, a huge lunch, and a huge dinner. You know, come 4 o'clock, shouldn't you be having a snack? So you have to get over that. No, I don't need to be eating because my body doesn't need it. Exactly. So talk a little bit about the mental bump that people have to get over from carbohydrate addiction.
Right, exactly. Well, a lot, carbohydrates, we call them poor man's Prozac because it elevates serotonin levels. I deal with clients that have a carbohydrate addiction.
It's like a withdrawal, right?
Yeah, and I don't even put them on the diet until we balance out their brain chemistry and correct some deficiencies. But when you transition away from carbohydrates and you start burning and when you start burning fat for fuel, those ketones will light your brain up like a Christmas tree. We could see it in MRIs.
That's amazing.
Students, it helps with long-term potentiation, and that's a long way of saying when you read something, you're able to store it in long-term storage. So a lot of amazing things will happen when you transition over to fat burning, physically and mentally, mood-wise. If we track from history, from the beginning of time, the different cultures, they don't eat 3 meals a day. So we're constantly eating carbohydrates 3 meals a day, and our blood sugar is fluctuating, and that's how we get cravings, and our brain lights up saying we need to eat.
Insulin levels are going through the roof.
Insulin levels.
Diabetes. All
Yeah, I mean, look at diabetes, obesity, heart disease. They're at epidemic proportions, and nobody's really looking at, hey.
Let's go into the warrior diet you've mentioned before. What warriors did for performance during battles.
Yeah, if you go back to the beginning of time, you drill down and find out what some of these guys were eating. Like during Genghis Khan's time, when they didn't want to be seen, they wouldn't start a fire and cook food. They would ride their horses and put the slabs of steak underneath the saddle so it would become tender so they could eat that. And then the greatest sports drink in the world, they would puncture the artery on their horse and drink some of the blood, right, proteins and fats, to keep going so they didn't have to start that fire and be seen. So there's a lot of interesting perspectives on what people ate. The Roman soldiers were called the bread eaters because they consumed a lot of bread, and they didn't last long when they were in battle. Another thing that when they were crossing the Pyrenees, I think it was Genghis Khan's group, also used a high-fat, something that looked like a billiard ball. It was animal fat made into a ball. Inside was caffeine. It was coffee beans, and they would eat that, and they said it sustained them with energy for up to 2 to 3 days. So they were basically in ketosis. They were burning beta-hydroxybutyrate on their brain and their heart. So it's really interesting when you study history and what they did for sports performance, and then you look at what happened the last 10,000 years when we became addicted to the agricultural carbohydrates. It sort of changed things, you know. Again, follow the history and what people ate. I mean, they weren't eating 3 meals a day.
Follow the money too.
Yeah, follow the money and follow. And in fact, they even came out with, this week, they came out with a new energy bar. It's pure buffalo protein, pure buffalo meat. So the shift is happening in real time.
Coming to a close here, we talked about carbs, the carb addiction, and then how fats are a more efficient fuel source for the body. Let's go into exercise a little bit, how it kind of relates to some of these endurance athletes. So how is exercise important to each patient and each individual based on whether they're an athlete or an endurance athlete?
When you go on a high-fat diet, your body actually releases amino acids and protects your muscle.
Okay, I was going to ask.
That's really interesting.
That's another mental hump that people have to get over. So you're in ketosis, you're eating a high-fat diet, you go to the gym or you finish working out, immediately people want to pound a sports drink or eat a protein bar or something.
Great.
Is that...
No, and here's where we go, and here's the hook. Remember, it seems like we're all plugged into the matrix, watching TV, we're listening to the ads and all the fitness magazines. Here's the deal. For thousands of years, millions of years, we used fat. When you're going into workout, you do not need to power those power drinks. You elevate your insulin levels and you shut off fat burning. When you go into the gym, you have about an hour and a half of energy in your muscles and another hour in your liver. Think about those marathon runners, the Kenyan marathon runners that cross the finish line in 2 hours and 3 minutes, which means they burn through the 3-mile mark in almost a 14-minute, under a 4-minute pace, under a 5-minute pace. They don't take in any sports drinks. But a lot of the marathon runners that I work with, they're drinking the goo and they're slamming the jellies and they're eating the power bars on a 10-mile run. But that's why they gain weight. They gain weight. That's why the marathon runners gain weight.
But, because I know some of your clients have asked you about that, or about this before, and even just the mental hump of, okay, I get out of the gym, I worked out, I need to go have a protein shake because I need to refuel my muscles with amino acids and stuff. But if you're in ketosis, if you're in fat burning, you're talking about how your amino acids automatically are skyrocketing or elevating, or your growth hormone is elevated. So talk a little bit about that.
Exactly. You know, one of the things happens when let's say you're exercising.
Physiologically,
physiologically, when you're exercising, you lower your blood sugar, you lower your insulin levels, and you increase growth hormone or your repair hormone. When you're on the ketogenic diet, or you're doing some intermittent fasting, and you're not moving, you're also lowering your blood sugar, lowering your insulin level, and you're increasing growth hormone. So when I use the ketogenic diet, when I use the high-fat diet, and we plug that in with some intermittent fasting, amazing things happen to people. They have more energy, they're more focused, they don't lose muscle mass. Yeah. That's what they teach us, that if you don't eat a certain amount of calories a day, you're going to lose muscle mass, but in this situation, it's not true. Yeah. Like I said, we studied a lot of cultures that only eat one meal a day since the beginning of time, and they're fine. There's something called 13 carbon delta where you could check the bones of some of these cultures and find out what they were eating now with the DNA testing that's out there, the amount of plants and the amount of meat that they were eating. So we're getting a perspective and a picture on what happened years ago so we could apply it today. And I'm telling you, the high-fat diet that we're using in our athletes is going to be the future of performance.
All right, so let's wrap it up here. So what do you want people to take away from this long conversation that we've had? High-carb diets versus high-fat diets. What's like the big takeaway you want them to leave with?
Well, what I want people to do is, listen, our team is all about education. As you know, we want them to go to the Russ Scala YouTube channel, get up to speed, get educated, clean the slate in your head, open your mind up, and try some new things. Keep a logbook. Try these diets. If you want to lose weight, don't restrict calories. You may have to increase your fat intake, and I know you haven't been trained to do that. Keep a logbook, get some baseline blood work, get educated on our YouTube channel, and don't be afraid to try new things.
Insulin is there to get the sugar out of your blood, not to convert it to energy. The body converts fat into energy without any processes being involved at all. It just burns it. It is the premium unleaded your engine needs. Anything else is E85 or lower. So it's a study, and you can't study it by reading the mainstream papers, magazines, and books written by Dr. So-and-so that say, eating this is good for you. You actually have to go into biochemistry, which is fairly boring. I will put a link in the video here of a good book that is pretty much gets into all that stuff. It's well written, and after reading it 4 or 5 times, it finally sunk in for me. But there's only a few chapters that you really have to read and understand, and that is how the body processes the food we eat. Everything else is kind of a history on different diets and fads throughout the millions of years people have been eating. And then there's some diet ideas and tips. So if you just get the few basic chapters down and figured out how your body actually processes the food and turns it into energy, you will understand that we were made to be meat eaters, the same as a horse cannot eat wet and moldy hay. And even though it's still hay, the cow can eat it. So there are subtle, slight differences, and as a prepper, you need to understand it, because this will affect your load, how much you're carrying, how much you have to store, how much it weighs, all of those things that in a bug out or a situation to where you have to retreat, you're not going to be able to carry that much weight. So that is my nutritional thought, and we go into it a lot, and I rant and rave about it a lot, and I think it's important. So in some more disturbing news areas, we have social media, pretty much Google, YouTube, Facebook. They're all really trying to get Hillary elected, which is fine. They can have their own personal preferences. I think it's funny that a corporation that large could sit there and say, everyone that works for us thinks Hillary is the bomb. But that's what it seems like they're doing. Now to me, and I've discussed this before on some of my posts and stuff, that I think it's an effort for them to just hedge their bets. Because if you look at it logically and simply, if Donald Trump were to win the presidency, he's not going to go after these big corporations. He's not going to use the FCC to shut them down. He's not going to use all of these tools at his disposal as a president to go after his enemies. Yeah, he has said that he will prosecute Hillary, but I think she should be. She has committed crimes. And that's the president's job, to see to it that the laws are enforced fairly. But he's not going to go after YouTube for letting all the content providers say bad things about him. He's not going to go after Google for skewing the analytics and the statistics and all the feeds to be favorable to Hillary and negative against him. He's not that kind of person. He's not going to go after his enemies. But Hillary, on the other hand, will. So if she were to win, and let's say Google and YouTube and Facebook were all in the tank for Trump, they might lose some of their licensing because she is that vindictive of a person. She's done it so many times in the past that it would be hard for anyone of sound mind to say she wouldn't. So to me, this is just a big hedging of their bets, because they figure, well, if we support Hillary and we go after our content providers that are negative to Hillary, then if she wins, we're covered. And if Donald Trump wins, no big deal. Nothing's going to happen to us anyway. So it's the gambler's philosophy, basically. It's like hedging their bets to where if Trump wins, they're good, nobody's going to come after him. But if Hillary wins, then they better have been on board with her message. Otherwise, she will yield that sword of iniquity of hers to strike down any opponents, especially in social media, because they are so large and such a giant audience that she would be after them all over the place. Now, we've seen this, what she did with Bernie Sanders, and it was corruption on a level that was unprecedented in American elections. It's all been proven, shown, but yet there she is. So don't think that if you had a big company and you were saying bad things about the person in charge, if that person in charge is a vindictive person, you're going to feel some of that heat coming out of the kitchen. So this is why I think a lot of these companies are changing their monetization in YouTube and stuff and their systems to where if you're against Hillary, they just don't want to be seen as patting you on the back in any way, shape, or form. So it's no more than a hedging of the bet. After the election, things will go back kind of to normal as far as the big social media types. But you know, if Hillary does win, there'll be some changes because she said there will be. And the recent change with ICANN, ICANN, it's pretty obvious that the internet, which consists of social media, I mean, it's not all the text documents that no one reads at universities. It is social media. It's the big voice of the American people that will suffer some of the results of ICANN and being transferred to a foreign power. They call it a consortium, but if you look at the consortium, it's a bunch of people that are in Hillary's camp also. So I don't think we are going to do too well as far as our voice for freedom and liberty if you're against a certain political party. So ICANN really can shut you off with the flip of a digital non-existent switch. And I've experienced it just as by making a mistake and not verifying an email address, and my website went down. This was done by ICANN according to my service provider. And it was because I hadn't confirmed my email address. So somewhere, someone said, well, it's not this person, so shut it off. And that's a good safety feature. when it was run by the United States government, who's been running ICANN and the internet since we created it for years and years and years and years. The federal government was always very nonpartisan about these things, and so it didn't matter if you were Alex Jones or Rush Limbaugh, you were fine. Your internet kept running. Now it's a consortium of people, rich people that have political agendas, and no matter what color you paint it, it will still fall under the blue banner of United Nations, because that's what that transfer was for. Now, to me, it's unconstitutional. It's United States property, and therefore it must be agreed on and voted on by Congress, our representatives, the people we elect. So it is property that is owned by the United States, paid for by us, we the people and the taxpayers, to build this giant infrastructure called the internet. So they can't give it away. And they're saying they didn't, but that's exactly what they did do. So once again, it falls back to being an informed electorate. So get informed, be part of the solution, not the problem. So on a personal note, I just wanted to tell you that I have the Tiatwaki channel up and running. It's tiatwakichannel.com. And if you don't know how to spell it, it's just an abbreviation for the end of the world as we know it. Channel.com. We got that all up and the website is working. There's still some tweaks I got to do on it, but this will be a channel for self-filmed programming by folks like you. So it is kind of an offshoot of the 72-hour bug out challenge, which I wanted to do, and it's all set up and running at the 72hourbugOutchallenge.com. But this show will need people like you out there doing a 72-hour bug out challenge, filming it, recording it, getting us the footage, and then we will make an episode out of it and we will host it on tiatwakichannel.com. Now, eventually I want this channel to be something more than just on the internet, even though that is modern media. I want to take the channel and actually make it a real channel with shows like this and the 72-hour bug out challenge and other shows that you may think of. So if you're a YouTuber and you make good quality content geared around the prepper community, then I would like to host that on the Tiatwaki channel. So you would make episodes and shows, whether it's bushcraft cooking or just bushcraft in general, and you are basically the spokesman, the host, the producer of the show. And then we might do it a weekly show, however you want to do it. But these are done by you, the viewer. And I think it's kind of a cool concept because it focuses all of those programs onto one channel. So even though you're on YouTube and you have a lot of subscribers, this would be a portal to where people go, well, I don't really like that show, but I do like this other show, and they don't have to surf all over the internet to find it. We're going to try to monetize it in a different way than the way it's done on YouTube, where you get a percentage of a percentage based on so many thousand views and subscribers and blah, blah, blah. These will actually be commercials that we will produce and insert into your show. That advertiser will be paying funds, actual real money. And then you'll be getting paid just like if you were the producer or the owner of a show like Alone or Naked and Afraid or Cooking with So-and-so. So you will be more of an active part in your monetization. And I think once we get this up and running, it will be great, because this will be the voice of people doing their own content, not waiting for someone to cast them for the next survival series guy, gal. You know, your odds of being on a show like Alone or quite astronomical, I think, if I was going to do the math. So think about it. If you have an idea for a great show, you can email me. Go to tiotwakichannel.com. Check it out. The best way to get a hold of me is always mark@prepperguy.com. And we can discuss this show that you maybe want to put together. And remember, you're the producer. You're the star. You're the cameraman, unless you have people that have knowledge on how to film things. A lot of these YouTube videos I see, they have their friend that's the cameraman, and they put together a really nice show. These days you can do this on your cell phone. And so we really are changing the media landscape across America. If you watch any videos by Gary Vaynerchuk, he's very into this new social form of media, to where I'm putting this show out right now on my cell phone, which is great quality. Pretty good audio. I still need to work on my audio and get some good mics and stuff. But hey, this is great video. And it's done on my forward-facing camera of my phone. Now it has a really good camera on it. So we have ways nowadays to get our message out besides just going on Facebook and going, oh, that sucks. We can put together a show. So this is my first show on this channel, and this will be called whatever I decide I want to call it. But so I've tried to put together some segments, and I hope you enjoyed it. You all have a great day. Remember, check me out. Facebook, there's the Tiotwaki page, Tiotwaki channel on Facebook, 72-hour bug out challenge on Facebook, prepperguy.com, prepperguy Facebook, Twitter, at prepper_guy on Twitter. So reach out, let's do great things together. And I'm trying to provide you a forum to where you can produce really cool content that's consumable by people on their smart TV and all that. So that's the effort of the channel. Like I said, mark@prepperguy.com, mark@72hourbug-out-challenge.com. And let's do cool things together. Have a great evening.